Smack! The sound of flesh being slapped echoes across the vast arena filled with 50,000 screaming fans. Another loud crash occurs as a body is slammed into a canvas mat inside what has come to be known as the squared circle. Inside the ring, professional wrestlers are engaged in their particular form of combat. One of the combatants begins to bleed after being hit with a steel chair. The ring is but one place where these matches occur. Wrestlers have fought inside the steel cage, out among the fans, on a scaffolding 30 feet above the ring, and even on the muddy banks of the Mississippi River. Pro wrestling is one of the most unique forms of entertainment that is available to the masses. It is a billion-dollar industry that is represented on a global level. Names like Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and The Rock are legendary and known throughout most countries in the world. Pro wrestling is big. Pro wrestling is a sport steeped in mystery, myths, and misconceptions. I became a fan myself during the 1980s, during the height of Hulkamania. I was what is referred to in the industry as a mark. That means I rooted for the good guys and I booed all the bad guys. And I believed that everything that was happening was completely real. Well, it's been a long time since I saw Andre the Giant fight Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3. And since then, I've become involved in the business as a ring announcer. And I've also become obsessed with what goes on behind the scenes in wrestling. I am now what is known in the industry as a smart. That is someone that knows exactly what is occurring in professional wrestling. Let me take you behind the veiled curtain into the sweaty locker room where the good guys and the bad guys do actually get dressed in the same room, and the ladies get dressed behind a sheet that is strung across the locker room. We'll explore 3 popular misconceptions associated with wrestling and learn some old carnival terms known as kayfabe. We'll learn just what is happening with the matches and what intricacies are actually involved in producing a good wrestling match. We'll explore how physical things really do get. The punching, the kicking, the tables, the ladders, and the chairs. How can a body absorb such physical punishment? And lastly, we'll look into the blood. Is it a blood pack that causes the crimson mask, as the great wrestling announcer Gordian Soley dubbed it? Pro wrestling emerged from the carnivals of the late 19th century. Trained wrestlers would take on all comers in what were very real matches, or in kayfabe terms, a shoot. The attraction eventually grew into a sport of its own, and early wrestlers like Frank Gotch, Jim Londos, and the Russian Lion, George Hackenschmidt, would engage in very real, very intense wrestling contests that would last sometimes 4 hours. These matches would be real to determine a victor. They would also be incredibly boring things to watch. This, factored along with the growing number of wrestlers being crippled by their contemporaries, led to the creation of the work. The work is the exact opposite of the shoot. The work is where the match, or where the winner and the outcome is predetermined before the match even begins. From the 1940s on, the work has become what we know today as modern pro wrestling. The promoter or booking committee decides who wins the matches or championships. What actually happens between the ringing of the bells is largely left up to the wrestlers themselves, with the exception of who wins or goes over in kayfabe terms, and sometimes the finisher. Most of the match is largely improvised by the wrestlers. In order to make the match flow seamlessly, they engage in what is called spot calling. This is really nothing more than them whispering in each other's ear as to what move they are going to engage in next. Pro wrestling has no off-season. They tour year-round, and they wrestle at arena or house shows in between televised events. This would be as close as they get to having anything resembling a scripted match, as wrestlers are indeed paired off to feud in a series of matches on non-televised events that lead to a perfectly polished match for the televised event. So in a sense, you could say they have rehearsal matches, but they occur in front of thousands of people. A Of course, when a wrestler smashes his opponent's head to the mat with a pile driver or DDT, he's doing everything he can to protect the wrestler, not to hurt him. This is all part of the work. Yet how can they engage in such brutal physicality without killing each other? Well, injury and death do occur in wrestling, but only when things go very wrong. The truth is, when somebody gets hit with a steel chair, they're getting hit with a steel chair. There are no plastic chairs in wrestling. When somebody goes through a table, it is not made of balsa wood. And an aluminum ladder would hardly support the weight of a 300-pound man, so when they get hit with a steel ladder, those as well are steel ladders. In these outrageous cases, reality does creep into the match. There are some techniques involved, such as where you hit someone with the chair, or falling into the proper spot on the table that has the most give. But mostly, I think Chris Jericho says it very succinctly in his book, A Lion's Tale, My Life in Spandex Around the World, when he states, that stuff just hurts. Hardcore legend Mick Foley has been thrown 20 feet off the top of a table through a press, 20 feet off the top of a cage into a press table. He has been chokeslammed by The Undertaker with such velocity that one of his teeth was sticking out of his nose. In a match with Big Van Vader in Germany, he had his right ear ripped off the side of his head. Mick Foley is also a best-selling author. In his book, Have a Nice Day, as well as the follow-up, Foley is Good, Mick relates that he has trained his body to take and absorb such physical punishment. Mick has never subscribed to taking pills, stating in his autobiography that he has taken 3 aspirin in his career. Now, Mick is an extreme example, having wrestled in everything from barbed wire matches where they take the ring ropes and replace them literally with very real, very sharp barbed wire, to exploding ring matches, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. The point in this case is when it comes to extreme things like chairs and ladders, sometimes the wrestlers just suck it up and take the pain. So what about the blood? Blood packs work great in the movies when the director can yell cut and reapply makeup, but on a live television show in front of millions of viewers, it's really not going to get the job done. Now, as I stated earlier, chair shots and table spots, these are real, so sometimes wrestlers just bleed. But then we have what is called juicing, or getting juiced, also called gigging or just blading. This is when a wrestler cuts himself with a razor blade, usually in the forehead, to get the blood straight from their own arteries. The razor is usually stashed in the tape that they wrap around their wrist, but it is not uncommon for the referee to be the one that passes the razor to the wrestler. The forehead is usually the puncture point because it has very few nerve endings, but it produces a good amount of blood. Mick Foley points out in his book some other tricks for producing good juice, such as taking aspirin to thin out your blood, or even having a couple of beers before the match, though not in Mick's case. Sometimes the razor is not necessary to get some juice. Anyone that has used their fist for fighting to any fair degree knows if you punch someone in just the right spot on the eyebrow, you can produce a gusher. In Have a Nice Day, Mick Foley relates a funny story involving former world champion from the 70s, Harley Race. In a match with Mick's arch rival, Big Van Vader, Harley, as the veteran, had been tasked with getting the juice out of Mick. Now, perhaps Harley was in need of an eye examination, but no matter how hard he punched or tried, he could not hit the right spot on Mick's forehead. But Harley has always been a tough, tenacious guy, so he just kept punching Mick in the face until Mick finally had to yell, "Harley, you're gonna kill me." Well, I hope after learning a few interesting things about the inner workings of pro wrestling, you might have a different view of the sport. I do consider it a sport. These men and women are athletes, and they are actors, and they are acrobats, and most importantly to me, they are artists. When modern superstar John Cena is engaged in a wrestling match, he is not concerned with winning or losing the match. His sole goal when he goes out there is to put on a good match and make sure the fans get their money's worth. These people have literally bled for my entertainment. I really could not appreciate it more. So what do you think now? Is pro wrestling real or fake? I will end with the words of Hollywood legend Steve Allen, what he said in the documentary The Unreal Story of Pro Wrestling. Pro wrestling is as real as your dreams. It's as fake as your imagination.